because that's just what an Irish terrorist looked like. So they take you in, you go through stuff. So we had to go through like 4 different types of security. So the security for airports, in our little 2 small airports, was the most secure in the world. And Vancouver Airport came in to say, we want to do exactly what you want to do. And after 9/11, all the US, we've got a consulate, a US consulate in Belfast. I think we're the only, because we're part of the UK, but I think we're one of the only cities that has got a city-based US consulate. And they said, here, come on and have a look at Belfast. And there was just, you know, we've been doing this for like 20 years. And the exchange of technology, and that was when I started to see sort of Belfast slightly open up a bit more and become, you know, we've done something here that we didn't really know what impact it was having, but it was keeping people safe when they were flying. But we took it that was just normal for us. That's just 3-hour lines in airport security was just the daily thing. And so that was an interesting thing, so we could actually part knowledge around the world. And I think from that, the more, and especially the United States has been probably one of the biggest allies and friends of Belfast in terms of, and we've actually got a thing called Friends of Belfast, which helped integrate the peace process and stuff. So I don't think there's any barrier. I think the more you can share information, the better. And you know, and you don't have to copy stuff, but you can take bits and pieces that may be good and can benefit, and make it your own and do something with it. And so, yeah.
I do think there are risks, and I think context matters, right? So I think if we can understand that there was a peace process that everybody agreed on and worked through to try and address and deal and heal trauma in communities, that's very different than the ongoing invisibilization that most American communities of color feel in their cities, in terms of now it's made new again, or now it's a comeback, or now it's something else. As if there wasn't a before, as if there weren't people who were holding it down and holding it in place through all of that. And so if we never get to the point where we can actually have conversations honestly about who persisted and existed through it, who should benefit now, and in what ways, then it's really, really hard to not feel the asymmetries of power and privilege and sort of expertise that come along with the idea that capital has moved in. And so I think it really matters what you got to go through as a city and as a people in terms of getting to the point where there's readiness and willingness to both welcome, but also know that in welcoming, you're not going to be displaced or invisibilized. And I think that there's some really tricky stuff about, like, you know, those histories of power that, like, we have to kind of talk about when we talk about our cities. And it shows up in the Starbucksification, it shows up in the Amazon, you know, headquarters stuff. But it also shows up in little tiny ways that don't seem as significant, like, you know, who has the privilege of accessing a land bank website that originally only was able to be accessed by the internet, who could pay cash, right? Who could immediately show up on the day and do those things. So I think you have to sort of say that there is a desire to be welcome and open, but only so long as you're also not going to be disrespected in that process.
Yeah. Michelle, and I want to hear more about there too, and how Philadelphia has done such a beautiful job of being a voice for being a welcoming city, at least from the outside perspective. I'm always like cheering when the mayor push backs on whatever Trump thing of the week to say, no, you know, we're a welcoming city, people are welcome here. But is that the reality on the ground? You kind of alluded to that before, and then how are you feeling about some of these issues we're talking about?
Sure, I mean, just to add to the last question you asked, and to add to it, you guys just shared, I think that Philly, especially on the neighborhood level, could use more examples of what other places are doing nationally and globally. I think we don't tap into that enough because we can be very parochial in our work. And I think that if we do that, we can have more of a feeling of confidence that we're not alone and see what other people are doing. And that copy and pasting you're talking about, I think about it as, you know, some of that exchange is all in the execution. So when you see something and really can learn from it, and if it's a direct copy and paste whatever. I mean, sure, great. You know, I mean, maybe that's like a compliment. But I do think
You're talking about like smaller scale neighborhood.
Yeah, that's where my head went.
Solutions.
Yeah, my head went there because I think about, you know, how on the, you know, depending on who you ask, there's 100 Philadelphia neighborhoods, and there are a lot of great people who are volunteering on the ground because they care about their neighborhood, but they very much lack often financial resources. So there's lots of, you know, partnerships with the city and other organizations, but a lot of times it's, you know, thinking creative with limited funds. So that's a perfect place to start to try to introduce more toolkits and frameworks and models and examples of things that can be executed that are, you know, maybe low resource but high impact, and in a way that doesn't feel impossible. And then you start to see little things happening that collectively equal bigger transformation.
Yeah. So like the how to do things,
right,
to then tailor them to your own community, as opposed to importing something fully baked to come.
And it feels so much better when you're like, when you look at something like that and you're like, oh, that was done in a place that has a similar challenges to Philadelphia or similar people. And again, it makes you feel like we're not alone. You know, we can do this.
Is there enough resource out there to get people moving between cities to learn and listen and share ideas?
I think so. I mean, I think with anything, you sort of have to find those things and not always connect it. But I do think that with some of our higher ed institutions, with other fellowship programs and things like that, and also with other sort of local stakeholders plugging into opportunities that are in other cities that can apply to Philadelphians applying to them, I think that there is a decent amount. Especially, I mean, really across the gamut too. I mean, anything from youth having those opportunities through, you know, adult professionals.
And for new Americans coming to Philadelphia, how's that with resource for onboarding, like, you know, new families, new businesses? Is there capital flowing to help people get started? It's one thing to say you're welcome here. It's another thing to really support people and, you know, their dreams.
So I'll admit I'm not fully in that world. I work with the Welcoming Center, and I literally called the director of the Welcoming Center, which is the organization in Philadelphia that offers really full round services to people coming to Philadelphia from a different country. So, and I called the director this afternoon to help get in my mindset, because I wanted to have some framing. So I do have one really interesting statistic that I'll read to you. But I think this says it. So from 2000 to 2016, a period in which the city's population grew for the first time in a half a century, the number of foreign-born residents rose by roughly 95,000, while the number of US-born Philadelphians fell by 44,500. So that's pretty dramatic, I think. But I think it's also very telling. So obviously, are we welcoming? I think yes, generally, but it also depends on your circumstance. You know, I think income plays a lot into that. So if you think about a new American, or new person rather, coming to Philadelphia from outside of the States, who has a college degree and is ready to go and can plug right into life sciences or to a corporation, or coming here for a job, completely different story than somebody who had to flee from their country to be safe and, you know, and seek refuge. And those two things are such drastic things. It's too hard to just say we're welcoming and welcome, because I think there are a lot of just natural barriers when it comes to the conversation around immigrants. You know, I think language and culture is just an automatic potential barrier.
If the message of the city is that to broadcast we're open and welcoming, does it feel that way on the ground, or are there ever tensions where people say, wait, you're giving a little too much attention to this group, what about us? You know,
it's definitely, I mean, I guess this is probably a thing with all cities. Yes. It's definitely a Philly thing, that you have sort of, I'll describe it as the old guard and the new guard, and as the in-between. So there's definitely I'm from Northeast Philly, so I feel like I can say this, but the not so nice slang term is that you're a neasty. I mean, and that's you're kind of nasty, neasty, you're born and raised in Northeast Philly, never gonna leave. Very, very one track in your thinking. I'm totally generalizing, but you grew up there, so whatever.
Yeah.
So I mean, there unfortunately, like some of the stereotypes you hear about Philadelphians and all that are, you know, there's some truth to it. I mean, there's some truth to stereotypes, right? But yeah, so I think it just depends on who you ask. But I do think about this when we, you know, even the other thing that's happening with our population, we're about 1.5 million, and we are the fastest growing country for millennials. So you think about that age group, and I'd have to think that there are millennials who have the means to pick up and move around. So that also says something about what our city is offering, and then the question of, are we still accommodating others, right? And then other thing I'll say on that is that and this is something that Peter from the Welcoming Center reminded me of, is that with all immigrant families, whatever, individuals either coming to the city or they're already been in the city, it's typical that their children, their grandchildren are all staying and have roots. So you start to see you start to see the sort of evolution of that, right? So my mom moved here from Japan when she was in her early 20s, and I was the first to graduate from college in my family. So from where my mom was, and her still to this day making below minimum, or below the fair wage, which is minimum wage, to me now, who got to graduate and do all these things, you know, she and I have totally different stories, right? So it's kind of all these different sort of angles to it.
Well, from a consumer perspective, the Philly does an amazing job with tourism marketing, because like you guys are on every list of like awesome places, and I feel like I'm always reading about great things about your city and your beautiful photography and great music and public spaces. I don't know, you guys are doing an awesome job marketing yourselves to the world.
Well, so I think there was a list where we had gotten listed like top 10 for public spaces or something.
Yeah.
But we were like second, it was like Barcelona, like all these crazy awesome places.
Yeah.
And then Philadelphia, which I'm really proud of, but I'm also like, really? I mean, Philly's cool, but next to like...
Well, it's always like the double-edged sword too. If you get like the good buzz media, Detroit's experienced that. You get like a lot of love in a burst, and then you're like, wait, hold on a second, is the narrative of the city being told the way it ought to be, and you know, all that stuff, so both, but yeah. Okay, opening up, we're winding down our hour here, but any questions from the audience for these fine people, or any thoughts from your cities on this question you'd like to share? I should have like teed you up to be thinking a little bit more, maybe. Yes.
You guys talked about the difference between marketing your city locally and then also internally. I'm an economic developer out of Athens, Georgia, and one of the things,
Talk about music. Great music.
Great. One of the things that we've talked about is coming up with a unified tagline for our city that really can promote it. City of Brotherly Love, a great tagline there. Ours, for the longest time, has been called the Classic City, and I'm like, what is that? But there's a lot of challenges that we face marketing Athens to people that are born and raised in Athens. You know, kids that really just want to graduate and get out of there. How have you guys taken on that challenge in Philly and other places?
I'll go first then. And we're still trying to figure it out. I mean, it's funny. The city council said, okay, we need to change the actual face of Belfast and how it's perceived. So the council went out and did their first community plan, which to me was astounding, the fact that they hadn't actually gone out and done this before, because it's a political-led organisation. So it came back and they said, what was the most important thing to residents in the city, which is basically who we work for, I suppose, and it was culture, and having their culture expressed. And they said that should be expressed in terms of how the city is seen as being a diverse culture and one that has grown probably more tolerant. So there's a place positioning strategy, like all councils and governments have to do. There's a strategy about a strategy about a strategy. Not a massive fan of strategies. I don't think there's too much words. Back of a cigarette pack, a couple of bullet points, and just try to do it, I think, is the way to do it. But we're sort of trying to do it through companies. I think you had mentioned this. We're trying to do it through the face of the people who are doing really interesting things. So it's the musicians, it's the technologists, it's the people who you wouldn't necessarily think Belfast is a great place for a startup tech company or a games company or music, but that's what it is. So we're sort of trying to push them out there. But it's tough. As I said earlier, like we're still struggling to do that in terms of trying to open the doors. Game of Thrones has been a really big opportunity for us, and it's now turned in. It sort of contributes more to the economy in the face of Belfast and the wider region than the TV series itself. The tourist stuff off. There's a new Johnny Walker or White Walker whiskey out that's selling. There's everything about Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones Monopoly and stuff. So that has done a lot. So see, having an economic impact like that, how that can be used to transform the face of the cities, amazing.
I actually have an opinion on this. Can I answer this a little? I'm going to answer from Detroit and New Orleans a little bit. I'm not a big fan of like marketing and branding because I think some of it's cheesy, especially with regard to cities. But to me, what I think I've seen as being the most impactful is when a place, like forget the slogan or the tagline, just is there opportunity. So to me, the sexiest look for a city is when you see in the stories of the city local people being invested in for their ideas, like just period. So like those stories will sell a place because you'll be like, oh my God, they care about their people. They're giving. You can see whether it's the city proper or angel investors or the community supporting one another, whatever way that looks. You see people thriving there, right, and valued. And I think when you see that, then you're like, oh, I want to be a part of that community. I started seeing that a lot in Detroit, too, because when grants and contests and challenges started flowing, then those stories would trickle out, and you would see, other people in cities would start calling. I see money flowing in Detroit, like I want to be a part of that, and I want to make a difference, and I see other people making a difference, and I see like part of that, want to be a part of that community. So one final thing.
Yeah. So I just would also kind of echo this, maybe from my time in Edinburgh. This was something where they used to talk about the Celtic cringe, because there is an esteem issue, right? If your city has been knocked down, if your country has been knocked down for too long, there is this kind of real issue of how do we tackle the self-esteem problem. And definitely action on the ground matters. But there was always this kind of saying from like Robert Burns where it's like, if only we could see ourselves as others do, maybe we would recognize the greatness that's already here.
Absolutely.
And I sort of echo that always. Like, how are you first and foremost investing in and lifting up what's great that's already there, because they're going to be the best mechanism for giving people the kind of hope and self-esteem that they can stay and make a living and a life doing the things that they love, as opposed to feeling like they have to migrate. Because we talked a lot about like how do you welcome, but also how do you create a sense of belonging that allows people to want to stay. And I think it's the task and the work that we do to do both at the same time.
Beautifully said. I agree. All right, any other final questions? Time? All right, it's time. Thank you guys so much for being part of this. Please